Thank you very much. How's everybody doing? It's going to rain the last 2 days. They said we had a drought, and yet, I'm telling you, and driving up and down the Parkway and Turnpike has been just absolutely astonishing these last couple of days. So
He's
happy
talking for Jeff Bell,
a chance
because Jeff Bell couldn't
to
make
try
it.
out a little bit. Let me start off first of all by saying I ran for United States Senate. I was in the primary in June. If you voted for me, thank you very much. I appreciate it. I came really close to meeting Jeff Bell. So thank you very much. Nobody tried harder than I did to keep Jeff Bell from getting the nomination for the United States Senate. And I got to know Jeff in a way that most people don't get to know a candidate. In the back rooms where, we're not talking our talking points, we're talking about our family, we're talking about, what we're doing last year, what our plans are for the future. And you really get to know a person. And rather than tell you all about Jeff and how I got to know him, let me tell you what I did on primary night to tell you how he moved me. I sent the press to bed primary night saying I'm contesting this election. There's mail-in ballots. It was within 3,000 or 4,000 votes. There's military ballots. There's provisional ballots. The next morning, I went on the Associated Press daybook and registered a press conference for 2 o'clock in the afternoon at the Monmouth County Board of Elections. And I said, I'm going to be there talking about the military ballot, the provisional ballot, the mail-in ballots. And at 2 o'clock in the afternoon at the Monmouth County Board of Elections, all the media showed up. There was TV, there was radio, there were newspapers, there were bloggers, for goodness sakes. I was a little late. 10 after 2, I came walking out of the distant parking lot with Jeff Bell. And I handed him his first and best attended press conference of the campaign. Totally snookered. Can you imagine if we said we're going to have a unity press conference the day after the campaign, or after the primary? Who would show up? But instead, we actually had the press there. They had an opportunity to meet this really smart, capable, competent, really conservative Reaganite who had come into the state with an objective of getting to the underlying cause of our economic problems. That's what he's running his campaign on. There's a lot of distractions that we're seeing in the press. If you wait for day to day, you have the IRS one day, you have Benghazi the next day, you've got Ebola the next day. We were dealing with Fast and Furious, and that's back in the papers. And all these things keep captivating our attention. And then we look, when we go to buy milk at $4 a gallon, and we're trying to figure out if we're going to buy food or medicine. Our kids are graduating with diplomas that are useless except as for wallpaper, and $100,000 in debt. And we're finding it harder and harder just to pay our bills and live our lives. The economy, this far into a recovery, really hasn't recovered. And the media and the political ruling establishment has been keeping us occupied with all these other crises and ignoring the most important thing, and that is the free market, which was supposed to make this the greatest country that ever was, and did exactly that. Because the Federal Reserve has expanded its mission to try and control the economy and control unemployment and control, the Federal Reserve treats wage inflation, wage growth as inflation, so they fight that. So on the one hand, you have the president saying, well, we need to have a higher minimum wage because we have to get wages up, and yet you have the Federal Reserve, which is about as Federal Express. You have the Federal Reserve out there saying, well, no, we have to treat wage growth as inflation. So they're constantly trying to tone down the effects of wage growth. Jeff Bell spent the last 30 years of his life working in economic issues and helping convert conservative Republican principles into effective economic legislation. That's a lot of words. Let me tell you a different story. His palm card has a picture of him with Ronald Reagan. He worked with Ronald Reagan when Reagan was the governor of California to help him translate the basic conservative principles of letting people keep more of their money and having that flow into the economy and build their businesses and build their communities. That turned into what became the Reagan Revolution. And when Ronald Reagan made it into the White House, it was Jeff Bell who was on the team that actually converted those ideas and worked with Republicans and Democrats to craft the legislation that became the Reagan tax cuts. That's the type of bipartisan, skilled legislation writing that we need. And that's what Jeff, by watching this go on for years and not get attention, came back to his home state, New Jersey. Now, how many people remember Jeff Bell from the 70s and voted for him? Yeah, here was a guy who said, we need to be using conservative principles as the basic playbook to solve the problems of government. And that was good enough for a young man to actually take out his sitting United States Senator in a primary. And he has been continuing to use that message through various think tanks and conservative enterprises that he's started. And he's been working to make conservative principles be used as the playbook in legislation. But you really don't get attention as a lobbyist, where you have to have the smart people, the committed people, the people with the vision necessary to fix the problems is inside the courtroom at the Senate, where they can actually use their skills and their knowledge and their intellect to sway the opinions and win the votes, and actually get the United States legislature doing the job they're supposed to do, which is protecting liberty, freeing the economy and unleashing it to actually develop our economy back to where we'll take care of us and our children and our children's children. Because when you look back at our Constitution, which I don't think Cory Booker has looked at in a while, and you look at the fact that we have a multi-trillion-dollar government, do you know why this government was established? What the purpose of this government is? It's in the Constitution. It's in the preamble of the Constitution. Our government has one big job, and that is to preserve the blessings of liberty to the people and to posterity. That's the job of the government, and that's why it was formed, that's why it was constituted. We need people in the United States Senate that understand that in the core of their being. And Jeff Bell is exactly that guy. His tune hasn't changed in 30 years. And at a time when most people would be thinking about really thinking back and retiring, God bless him, he's 70 years old. He fired up that campaign horse, and he's been riding it up and down the state of New Jersey, educating people to the fact that there are all these distractions that are keeping us from the real thing that's bothering us, is that we're having trouble buying food and paying the rent. Our parents can't afford to stay in this state. Our kids want to leave, and we're having trouble just paying the bills. And it all comes down to the fact that there is no fundamental economic leadership coming from the legislature of the United States. They've totally abandoned it and handed it over to the Federal Reserve. And that's what Jeff wants to do. Jeff wants to get that debate going. Doesn't want to be the king, change all the rules, but he believes that we need to get the Congress and the Senate to re-accept their responsibility to protect the people from too much control, too much regulation, and too much overbearing power by the part of unelected officials, among other places inside the Federal Reserve. So that's what he's doing, and I give him a lot of credit. So when I did not win my campaign for the United States Senate, I knew somebody who would do exactly what I said we needed to do, which is get the legislature responsible for doing what they're doing. Go to Congress, not with the idea of making selfies and making yourself more popular, but maybe just going to work. Now let me talk about Cory Booker for just a second. He got an endorsement today that reads like this. The Gannett newspaper said, "Booker is our choice for Senate, but we make that pick with little enthusiasm."
Wow. Oh my God.
His best qualities are his character and his charisma. Really? No, we tried that once. It was called Obama. No, we don't need people with on-the-job training needed. We need people who can get right in the United States Senate with a sense of purpose, a sense of direction that can move forward. And that's what Jeff has been trying to do, is take those skills that he's developed over his lifetime and put them to work for us. We have the opportunity here in the state of New Jersey to send the most qualified, the most competent, the most ready-to-go person to help the government get out of the economy's way that any state, anywhere, anytime could ever send the United States Senate. We can do that right here in New Jersey. And some people say, well, Booker, He's got all that money, he does. It's from Hollywood. Do we want Hollywood senator? No. We have Booker out there, Mr. Twitter figures with hundreds of thousands or millions of followers. Now let's think about it. Can't run against Booker. Booker's going to win. Booker's going to win. Booker's big, right? Well, no. I mean, I'm telling you about what the media say. He didn't even show up for Gannett's editorial review board. He's been dodging debates. He won't talk about the issues because he doesn't have any issues he runs on. He talks about bipartisanship and he sponsors legislation that will go nowhere and votes in lockstep to the left of Barack Obama. That's what Cory Booker is. And the people of the state of New Jersey are realizing that. So we have the opportunity to educate our neighbors. Plus, Booker is more myth than man. Remember Mr. Twitter God, Mr. Popularity? When he ran last year in the special election, he was running against Steve Lonegan. He had a 5-to-1 spending advantage. He was the rising star of the Democrat Party. He had endorsements from all over the planet and the galaxy, for all I know. And here's this guy coming into this campaign, Mr. Superstar, and he was able to win his seat by a whopping 12 points. That's all. That's all he was able to do with all of his popularity, his rising star, his money, his endorsements for everything that he had. That's all he could do. There is no attraction for Cory Booker in this state. It's a myth. And the first thing we have to do is say the emperor has no clothes. This man has no business being in the United States Senate. We need to put somebody in there that will protect our savings, will protect our economy, will protect our lifestyle, will protect the very foundation of our country. And that man is Jeff Bell, and we have the opportunity to send him to Washington this year. Now, let me give you some numbers. Between Jeff and I, we got about 80,000 votes. So if everybody who just voted for him and me in the primary called up 10 people they know, people you know, and made sure they vote this year, and listen to them say, well, what's the bother? I'm busy. It's useless. It's hopeless. And just put up with that. Not from strangers. I'd love it if you called strangers. But if we went out to 10 people we know, and each of those 80,000 people brought 10 people to the polls with, that's 800,000 votes in an election where less than 2 million are going to be cast. And so just among us, we can actually make the wave that's going to move this election. Because the thing that could hurt us this year, the thing that is hurting the entire state this year, the enemy we have to fight is not Cory Booker. It's not Barack Obama. The enemy we have to fight this year is voter apathy. It's voter apathy that gave us Obama. It's voter apathy that gave us Harry Reid. It's voter apathy that gave us Nancy Pelosi. It's voter apathy that is giving us everything bad that we hate happening around us, because people with the intellect and the commitment and the responsibility to vote find it deep within themselves, think, well, I don't have to. You need to work on the people you know that trust you, and at least blast the apathy out of their hearts this year and get those 10 people into the polls. Same thing is true with fundraising. If everybody that voted for me or Jeff had just sent $10 to Jeff's campaign, that's $800,000. That's a lot of money. And who really can't come up with $10? That's really what it takes. They say, well, Jeff doesn't get any support from the GOP. That's because Jeff is going after the very financial lifeblood of the GOP elected ruling elite, Federal Reserve and Wall Street, because he understands they're giving the shaft to the working man. And here we have a Republican that understands that and is saying that. And so those people are not really supporting Jeff. So it becomes incumbent upon us to send him $10 if we can. Bell2014.com. Those $10 bills add up. And as I said, if everybody who voted for him sent him $10, he'd have $800,000. Send 100 if you can. But anyway,
What was that website again?
Bell2014.com. So that's what we can do. We can actually win this race by mobilizing people that trust us and committing to get those 10 people to the polls. And if they're inspired, maybe you can get one of them to get 10 people to the polls. I saw it happen with Amway, so really, network marketing really works. If you get people to trust you, and this is very important, because we're talking about putting a guy to Washington for the next 6 years who's just going to rubber stamp all of Obama's liberal agenda if we don't do our job and motivate our base to get out there. But if we do motivate our base, and we send a Republican to Washington who understands economics, New Jersey will send the most brilliant economic mind to the Senate at a time when we really need to have that. And I don't know if you've been watching these guys on television, a lot of them seem like they don't really have a clue how the economy works. And there's a lot of Republicans that are going to office right now that just want to have their hands on the controls of big government. Jeff isn't that guy. Jeff wants to get the government out of the way of the people, out of the way of the economy, to make this country, which is the best country God ever blessed any people with in the history of history. And that's what he's out to do. So we have the opportunity to do that, to save this country for our children and for our children's children, because that's our job as voters, that's our job as citizens. Can you help me with that?
Yes.
Can everybody help get 10 people to the polls? That would be sensational, because with that, I think we have a good opportunity to actually win this and shake the political establishment to their core. Thank you very much.